Yeah, I did this yesterday at home. I did it in 43 minutes because I want to have enough time for questions. Even though our email address is in the book you guys got, and so if you're out and you just have questions about anything pertaining to this or maybe just history, we'll be glad to help. We used to, when we give it in Bellevue, we would arrange with the city office, the county clerks, to come in on a Saturday when they're working. They work every first and third Saturday, called Special Saturday, but the records room was usually closed, but they would open it for us, and we would bring the people that attended our seminar and let them do it, and we're right there to help. We'd certainly, if you think you need somebody to go with you, but I think you guys would be great. I know it's daunting to approach the courthouse, and with that it's uncertain, but it's not a bad thing. And you won't spend more than a couple hours there, no matter how hard yours is. They just don't take that. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm Jim McPhail. This is Marcy. Jody's working. If you can know Jody, she's down. She was one of the ladies at the desk, and my wife had to. She's up in Chicago with our daughter. We're moving here this weekend, and I'm jumping on the train tonight. So this is how to research your home, and we don't add it because it makes it so wordy, but also the people that live there. That's the harder part than researching your home, because sometimes your house is rented. That makes it a little tougher. Okay. So we'll cover researching your property. Your property is different than your home. Your property's been there forever, and you can chase a deed all the way back to when James Taylor got it. If you're from Campbell County, Newport or Bellevue, and about that same time for Cuffington. We'll talk about going to the courthouse and other sources you might get, primarily at your city hall, your town hall, whatever you guys call it. Obstacles you encounter and how we're going to overcome them. We'll also cover researching the house and the people who live there. We'll show you how to use maps, and you have to use the result from the deed searches, because if somebody owned the property, they're a good candidate for. One of them built the house probably, and most of them probably lived in the house while they owned it. But it's not a given. We had lots of rentals. Okay. We're also going to cover preservation. This is Preservation Weekend, so we're going to touch on this. This will go quick. The Preservation Act of 1966, it gives us some good tax incentives. First, it gives the cities the right to have a historic district and enforce it, and it also provides for monetary benefit to doing the right thing if you live in a historic district. So it all starts with your deed. If you don't know where your deed is, don't worry. But if you have your deed, look on it, and they all have a statement after it talked about, who sold it, who bought it, all that. It says, being the same property that Walter and Martha Ackerson got by this deed. These are Marcy's parents, so we encounter most of these obstacles helping Marcy research her property. So hers is the perfect one for us to use as an example. So you're going to hear a lot about Marcy's property. And that's our next step. So that tells us, go to this deed booking page, look at it, and you ought to find the next one, and then you just walk your deeds back. And when we did our house, that's the way it was. It was easy peasy, lemon squeezy. We were in and out. We're like, this is great. We're going to tell everybody. And then Marcy says, hey, help me. I said, great. We'll be in there like 10 minutes. Ding, 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 ding. And then we hit obstacle after obstacle and found out that we just got lucky that there was an unbroken chain with no divorces, no bankruptcies, no anything. No declaring your sister crazy. Well, it happened. We'll see. And so if you don't have a deed, you got to go to something called the PVA, which is the Property Valuation Administrator. Every county's got one. If you live in Campbell County, you're lucky. You can sit at your computer and go to the Campbell County website. You can see deeds back to 1985. If you live in Kenton County, it costs you money, $5 an hour, to do it from your home. It's free if you go to the courthouse. I don't know about Ohio. They're all the way across the river. You search by owner or location, and it's scary how much information is there. Just knowing your name, I can look up every piece of property you own in any of these counties and how much you paid for it, what the address is, and a whole bunch about it. While you're at it, you want to record your PID, property ID number. We say that a couple of times. It's just good to have because it's the thing that tags your property legally. It's a PID and property ID number, and it's in the, I'll show you. It's listed in the upper left of every page of the PVA listing, and that's Campbell County. Kenton County's is different. It's on a screen, and it looks like a database from the 80s. But it works. It has all the stuff. This is Marcy's sales history back to 1985, and you can see the only thing there is her buying it from her parents. And then the other, so you go to sales history.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. You go to sales history, and that's what brings this up. And so that just tells us what we already knew from the main page. Now we're looking, this is Marcy's deed. She can go there, and if she doesn't have a paper copy, she can go to the courthouse, get this deed book, look at that page. The N stands for Newport. Is there anybody here not from Bellevue and not from Ohio? Okay, no, the reason why I'm asking is if you live in a nothing in Bellevue is before 1866 because Bellevue, first house built in Bellevue was in 1866. If you live in Newport, you can go back before 1860. All records before 1860 are in the courthouse in Alexandria because that was our only courthouse up until 1860. And in 1860, instead of moving everything, they decided to just build one in Newport, start fresh from there, but anything in Alexandria in that area still gets done in Alexandria. So we have two working courthouses. But for Bellevue, it's easy. All of our stuff is in Newport. Hi, come on in.
Did you want to use your phone?
Oh, yeah. But remember when Target sold these for like $1 10 years ago? They used to drive our dogs crazy, and now they just don't care. But
Ready?
I should point. Yeah, so Marcy's going back to 1985. We only get one sale, but if we go to her next door neighbor, you can see they've had a lot of sales. And what this did, this just saves you time at the courthouse. We've got all these deed books, and we can jump all the way down to, go ahead, Marcy, to that, and that's where we can start when we get to the courthouse. Still write all this stuff down because it's information that you can use, but you might want to hit the books and find out, because it doesn't say who sold it, it just says who bought it. But it still saves you a little bit of time. You've already got all these. So at the courthouse, you're going to need pens, pencils, paper, and go. Starting point. We know we want book 645, and we're heading to page 464. That's a lot of common numbers there. Kenton County Public Library. Besides the clerks at the courthouse, the next equally helpful are the people who work in the Kenton County Public Library on the second floor there at Scott Street. That's their history and genealogical. They're awesome. They have so many resources. They have all the Williams directories that you'll need to help find who lived in your house. And they also have this form, and it gives a bunch of this stuff that you're going to need. Group number is important to overcome obstacles because when you have to go to what's called the index book, in the more recent ones, you have to have a group number because that's how they're lumped. They're lumped by group numbers. And I write here also record your PID and property ID number and subdivision and lot number. Okay, so this is what we use, and I take pictures of everything. I know you're not supposed to. There's signs everywhere saying don't take pictures, but if you're discreet, they don't really care. But copies are quartered, but then these books are huge, and I don't know how you can make a copy. Most people are just making a copy of a specific part of the page, I guess, but I like to get the full page. So, go ahead. And so, yeah, that's where we started. One more. So, if allowed, take pictures or be discreet, and otherwise you can take copies. Quarter a piece at the Campbell County. Ask the clerks for help. The other people in the records room are working, and the clerks are really, really glad to help. They're very helpful. So here we are. We're on the deed booking page for Marcy's. And this is a typical deed. This is a gift deed, but they're all set up the same. So a gift deed is between family members, and so it's recorded that she paid $1. And then the top part is always who sold, who bought, and how much. but you'll see a lot of dollars. This one happens to have the address, but that is not common. That's a more recent thing. Way back when, you just bought land and any buildings on the land came with it. It was just assumed. And that's what makes it hard to tell exactly strictly by a deed unless it specifically says "and a house" on it, which we've found. It's tough to tell strictly by the deeds when your house was built. And then the next part is the description. Marcy's lot is 30 by 100, really rectangle. We're pretty sure it never changed, so we don't bother writing that down. But for more complicated ones, you're going to write down the legal description. That'll come in handy when you start getting back into the murkiness of people lopping off pieces of land. You can kind of follow which piece is yours. But we're looking for lot 29 of Block K in Harris Ayers edition of Bellevue. But this is the other thing. This just makes sure we're in the right place. Previous transaction hit tells us now we want to go to book 427, page 24. And hopefully for all of you, that's as easy as that's all you guys ever have to do is just get a deed book, write down the information that's on it, look at your next deed book, go get it, and you just tick them off. You're going to want to,
Fingers.
You're going to want to record the group number and the PID. You want to hit it one more time? And the PID number. I keep saying that, but these are important. In Campbell County, our group numbers are 5 digits. The original one was only the last 3, and that's what you'll use to navigate the index books. Okay. Go ahead. So here we are. We went to the next deed booking page. Go. And I put this early, so you can see the group number is just the last 3 of the previous one. It's 508. Okay. And this is your regular, they call them warranty deeds. This is just the regular deed. Group seller, the grantor, the grantee, and the price. And then the description, Block 39, Block K, and then the next book. Go ahead. And so we're down to here now. And then that book sent us to this, and we went all the way down to Joseph Krogman selling to the Bentons. Now when we went to that book, it sent us to a master commissioner deed. Does anybody know what that is? Well, if you're reading the top, you do. It's the document, a master commissioner is a judge, basically, in certainly Campbell County. I bet they have the same thing in Kenton County. And there's a divorce, a bankruptcy, or somebody's contesting a will or something. The judge says, you have to sell this piece of property. And so after you guys agree on who you're going to sell it to, you go back to the judge, and he makes it formal. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. This is case number. I got a little ahead of myself. This has the case number, plaintiffs, defendants, purchaser, and purchase agent. It's much like the top part of a regular deed. Go ahead. And this is the property description. Okay. So this says that James Faulkner is suing his sister Mary Faulkner, and it goes on to say a person of unsound mind. It says that twice here. Person of unsound mind. And they have to sell it to Joseph Krogman for $1,525, and it's June of 1904. But the problem with this, you'll see, is that it doesn't say how the Faulkners got it. There's no previous transaction. Go ahead. There's often no mention, and so this was the, where do you go here? So that's when we learned about index books. So obstacles you run into are typos. And we ran into this one just this week when we were in Kenton County. We were researching a house that some friends recently bought on Lavasser. It's near Holmes High School. It's a beautiful thing that they're going to try to bring back. And they sent us to page 268 of book 764. A quick word about Kenton County. They're not as streamlined in their history as Campbell. There are books for independents from when independents started keeping records up until they joined merged with Kenton County for record keeping. So if you have a house there, you're going to need to look at independence books. And then they stopped and restarted their numbering system that they're, especially for low numbers like below like 300, there may be 3 different books with that same number. You just have to know which one you're looking for. It's a little tricky, but it's doable. But anyway, they sent us to this booking page, which is high enough that we knew there was only one book for 764. And we couldn't find it. Well, I mean, when we get there, it is not our property. It's no, I don't know where it was, but it wasn't what we thought it would be. But the clerks had pointed out where the index books were, and we grabbed an index book and we see this entry. Go ahead. And we know we're in the right place because Peter Bushelman and Peter Bushelman, you can see the name. And it's book 764, of course, but the actual page number is 248, not 268. So now we're back in business. It took us about 5 minutes to do that. And then we just ran the rest of the deeds back. They're not always quite that easy, but they're pretty easy, and that's how you do it. You go to an index book, which is a record of all the transactions. You just find where you got stuck and just look at the previous transaction, and that's the book you want to go to. So typos obscured. You get this in early ones. I don't know why they decided to just write on top of writing. I guess staples weren't invented or paper clips, but yeah, you have to deal with that sometimes. And then master commissioner deeds, we already talked about that, but they're bankruptcy, divorce, suing somebody's estate, and like I said before, there's often no mention of previous transactions. So index books are a record of every transaction, and be careful when you're in the index books, especially Camden County, because the left side is deeds and the right side is mortgages. And while they're interested, you might care about who they took their bank loan out from, but don't think that's the deed book you got to go to, because there are mortgage books everywhere too. This is what they look like, one of them, because Campbell County has 3 series. That's another caution. You just jump into one, and if you are nowhere near your deed book and page, then you're going to have to go to either a more recent book or a more an older book. You'll have to feel your way around that, but the clerk ought to be able to help you with that. But you got to know your group number. Oh, and this is the one we grabbed from Covington in Kenton County. We were looking for 1227. I remember the numbers. And we found it in that book right there. Okay. And plats are big maps, and they're in the courthouse. They're pretty cool, and they're legal. They are what ties your deed back to a physical piece of land, right? So Marcy, here we have the plat for Block K and Block N of Harris Ayers edition of Bellevue. Go ahead. And we know that Marcy's lot is here because it is lot 29 in Block K. And there's only one lot 29 in Block K, and so and this tells you exactly where it is. And these are all dimensions, and they'll just pick some surveyor's mark, and that's how you prove that your neighbor built their fence on your house, on your property, or something like that. Can you see? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are plats. So here we are. We don't know how Joseph Krogman. No, we do know how Joseph Krogman he got it from, but we don't know how the Faulkners got it. So go ahead. So now we're overcoming an obstacle. We're interested in lot 29 of Block K. You hear that a lot, but it's true. So we make sure we're in the right place. There are several entries for this, and they go oldest to the most recent. And then there are other pages, but this is the page where we need to start. To get the details, you got to look on the deed booking page. Although it might not be a deed book, you'll note that 2 of these are master commission. So they are separate books. You can see they have a different number. This is 6 and that's 5. But they're just a few aisles over they're in the same. Okay? So here we are, just to remind, we're down where he sold it to the Bentons and 8. Go ahead. And that's the same one. So we know we're there. So this is how. And then that's the master commissioner that got us our snag. Go. Oh, and you can work backwards and forwards from here. So that's a master commission transaction that we couldn't overcome. Go ahead. And then we just jump back up to this one, and you go ahead and write that one down too, since we're there. And everybody in Bellevue can trace their land back to one of James Taylor's heirs, because it was part of his estate. But no houses were built until 1866. Like I said, that was all lightly wooded kind of farmland. He got lumber from there for his fireplace, and let cows graze there every now and then. And it just had a road through it that connected to what was known as Jamestown, and now is Dayton. So anybody that tells you their house was built in 1840 in Bellevue, because we hear this a lot, 1862, we know it's not true, because the first house was built in 1866. As we said, where the UDF is, under Pump 1. So Charles Coughlin got it from the Bellevue Town Lot Improvement Company. Bellevue Town Lot Improvement got it from a man named Gus Harms. Any Bellevueites know that beautiful house at 235 Berry, right there at the stop sign at Ross, like about a half a block up, but on across the street, with the beautiful porch. Gus Harms had that house built in 1872. Very colorful guy, ended up making $1 bazillion in silver mines out in Nevada, and moved to New York City, and dies in Atlantic City in 1913, probably surrounded by houses of silver. But he was a buyer and a seller of real estate in Bellevue. Gus Harms got it from Virginia Van Vost, and that's when you know you got to just about the end, because the Van Vosts, they never lived in Bellevue itself, but she is a descendant of Keturah Harris. She's one of Harris's heirs. Keturah Harris was James Taylor's daughter. These are James Taylor's granddaughters. How many people have heard that the streets in Bellevue were named after James Taylor's son-in-law? Okay, it's on our city Facebook. It's on our city website, which isn't true. They're actually named after Keturah. Some of them are named after Keturah Harris's sons-in-law. Virginia Van Vost. You can see Anna O'Fallon. There's a Foote, and there's Josephine Ward. So in Bellevue, we have those streets, and they define what is Harris Heirs Addition. Go ahead. Oh, and Virginia Van Vost bought it from her cousin Thornton, because all the Harris heirs sold it to R.T. Thornton. He divided it up into lots and then sold those lots back. And go back. So when you get to something where was involved in a lot of lot selling, you know that's just land speculators passing land back and forth, and there's probably not a house there at this time. But you can run this back as far as you want. Now we're going to talk about split lots, which are lots that have been partitioned up. This is taken together, this whole parallelogram with lot 33 of the Williamson edition. Jane Williamson was one of James Taylor's daughters. If you look at the or the PVA for both of these, go ahead. Because 150 Washington and 343 Fairfield, but the lot is both are given as part of lot 33. So how do you know which part if you're looking at a deed? Go ahead. So here's the deeds, part of the deeds for both of those, and they both say part of lot 33. Go ahead. Of Williamson's addition, but this one says beginning at the southwest corner of Washington Avenue and Union Street. Go ahead. And that's that corner right there. And and so you know it's talking about that lot. And this one says beginning at the intersection of the north line of Fairfield Avenue and Washington Avenue. And that's that corner, and so you know it's that lot. But lots that have been split up, because some of Bellevue's original lots were huge. By the time they got to Harris Heirs, they learned the lesson from Williamson that their lots took a long time to sell because nobody wanted to buy that big a plot of land. So that's why our lots in Harris Heirs are much smaller. You could buy as much land as you want, you would just buy more lots, but you didn't have to buy a big chunk of land. Okay. So now estimating when your house was built using maps. So our favorite, well, I'll talk about maps first, let me tell you our favorite. There are several maps that you'll find useful. Sanborn maps. Sanborn maps are fire insurance maps that were used. They were made right up until the 1960s, but they were really important starting about 1864. I think the first one was good. There are these big, colorful maps. The Kenton County Public Library on the second floor has one. Go take a look. It's kind of in bad shape, but you can see just how big the pages are and how colorful they are. They're color-coded as to whether your house is brick, whether it's frame. There's information like the direction of the wind, what your town's firefighting capabilities are, if you have a volunteer fire force, or if you have paid people, where do you get your water, how much is available. Because the people who determine your premiums live in Chicago or New York City or Hartford, Connecticut. And so they see your address, they bring up this and they say, okay, here, well, they're downwind of a carpenter shop with sawdust, and there's a paint store next door with solvent. So yeah, we're gonna up their premiums, but at least they have something to go by. For us, they're a boon because there's an accurate depiction of your house. It's the right shape, tells you how many floors it is. They're just neat. You can get them. The link at the Kentucky Digital Library doesn't work. Library of Congress has all of them. There's just a little more clicking involved, but they have them all, and you can download them. I got a bunch saved in my computer. And so here's an example. This is the former Fifth Third Bank in Bellevue. So this is that corner of Taylor. And you can see these big lots just didn't sell a lot. They actually cut off the back of these to put houses on Prospect, but that's not the way they were designed to be. When Bellevue was first founded, it was envisioned to be a place for rich people to come. It was cooler. We had a beach. Nobody else around had a beach ready to go. And they were hoping to attract retirees and rich people from the city who wanted to just take a skiff ferry across to go to work. And we got a bunch of those at first, and that's why we have these grand houses. But then it became more of a working class. And so, okay, so the next type of map, and I have a printed copy from the Campbell County Historical Society if you want to take a look afterwards. Really cool. It's an atlas from 1883 of Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties. And they're based on surveys. We say fairly reliable. We haven't found a mistake on them yet, but we haven't looked at every map, so we're not going to say they're entirely foolproof. But if you could find your house on one of these maps, and they cover all these, if you can find your house, you're pretty sure that your house was there. And this is what it looks like. Harder for Bellevue, I cut it off. It's color coded. This isn't in color. This is just a black and white. But it's the same maps. So now, if you want to using Sanborn maps, how do you use them? Well, for Covington has many more Sanborn maps because it was more important and got big and was growing, and they got issued more. Bellevue only has 4 that we're on, 5, but there's not much difference between the 4th and the 5th. The 1886 map is the earliest map we have. Just pick this block: Lafayette, Taylor, Prospect, and Poplar. If your house is on here, then you know it was standing in 1886. Now, before 1886, if it happens to be covered on the map, you can look at, this is the atlas, that same one I was just talking about. You can see that if you live in one of these 6 houses, your house was built sometime between 1883 and 1886, and that narrows it down for you greatly. These 5, you can use in the atlas, you can say these 5 houses were standing in 1883 based on that. Okay, so now we jump to the next Sanborn map for us, which is 1894, and you can see what it's starting to fill in. Go ahead. And then this is the next one, 1910. It's filling in even more. What they did here, I'll show you. You can see that the lots here run like this, but this guy bought this one big lot and then turned it sideways and put a bunch of the houses on Lafayette. There was never intended to be houses there. That was always supposed to be just a road to get through. That's why Lafayette is so tiny, at least at the beginning. It's quaint, but it's tiny. And then by 1940, the lot's pretty much filled in. House numbers and street numbers, I can't say this enough. Numbers change. In Covington, I know they changed about 1860. Newport's changed in about 1894. Bellevue's changed in 1902. We've changed a few street names, but we changed our entire numbering system in 1902. As you can see, these 3 houses here are 73, 77, and 79. But in 1902, They're 216, 212, and 208. So not only did they change how they number, they went to the 100 block. When they started, they just started at the end near Dayton, like say on Fairfield, and they made allowances for where houses may be, and they skipped some numbers and just went 1 to whatever it was just before Taylor's Creek, and then they started from the river and went up. And then they went. This is where they went to the 100 block. Houses may change physically over time. You can see this one here is a 1-story according to the Sanborn map, and you can see its footprint. And here it's a 2-story house, and the footprint has changed. I'd say it's a different house. Even if they added on and added a story, to me that makes it a different house. But if I had to guess, I'd say it might have burned down, or just got into a condition to where we're just going to tear it down and make it bigger. The other thing is, on the 1886 map, there's a foundation dug. In 1910, you can see the brick house. I don't think you dig a foundation, just leave it there to collect water. So I would say that this house was probably built in 1886, maybe early 1887. So if you live in your house, you can be comfortable with that. Okay, so now you can use city directories. Are we familiar with them? They're like an early version of the phone book, and the county, Kenton County Library has the complete set that we have. All the libraries in the area pulled together, so Campbell gave theirs so that somebody would have a full set, and then the leftovers went to Campbell County and Campbell County Library. So they have a lot because there were a lot of leftovers, but it's not complete. And the Historical Society has a few that people just had because they were used in stores and stuff. They're online with Ancestry, and you can access Ancestry free from any public library. You want to search for your address as well as anybody you think might have lived in your house. Searching by address is more difficult in the old ones because it was all alphabetical by who lived there, and you just have to go down until you see your address. And house numbers, at least in Bellevue, just weren't used much before 1890, and street names and numbers may have changed, so you have to keep that in mind. This is an example from Bellevue. This is one of our favorite early residents. His name is Nick Barrow. And you can see how his name is spelled. We could have. It's B-A-R-O here, and here it's B-A-R-R-O-W, and it doesn't really matter because he couldn't write, and in the early voting books, he just has an X, and somebody would write his mark next to. But I'm sure he knew how his name was spelled, but this guy didn't. Also, Helm Street, Bellevue's never had those streets. There was a Hallam that ran under where the UDF is now. When the UDF came, they closed that street. UDF brought the property on either side. They put their name. It was Hallam, and I think if you say it fast enough, or maybe with a German accent or with an Irish accent, because we had a lot of those kind of immigrants, whoever was writing down for this book heard either Elm or Helm. So we're back to, we got stuck again here for, this one's not. We just thought this was interesting when we found it, because we had the index book to get us back. If your property, because that's all that's listed on your deed, increases in value greatly, then you can imagine either somebody was a heck of a salesman or they built a house. So you can see Walter Forster purchased the property from the estate of Charles Copeland for $175 in 1899. And you can see here the person bringing the suit, or the entity, is the Christian Moorline Brewing Company. It turns out Charles Copeland owned a saloon in Cincinnati, and when he died, the saloon had debts, and they owed money to Christian Moorline for beer. Christian Moorline sued, and the magistrate said, okay, to pay him off, you have to sell this property. So they sold it for $175. Walter Forster sold it to Catherine Faulkner.
Dang. Sorry.
Hair trigger. About a year and a half later for $1,650. So again, either he's a heck of a salesman or he built that house. So we think the house was built sometime in 1900 or late 1899. So we look for ways to prove that. Go ahead. So we look at the 1902 directory for Bellevue and we see Kate, who we assume is Catherine, living with James, who's going to have his sister declared insane a few years later. Living at 210 Van Vos. Now that is not Marcy's address, but we know that they changed in 1902. So we look on the Sanborn map, but since there's no house there, they don't have an address. Go ahead. We know this is what we're looking for, which makes it Marcy's lot. But if we look over here, we see this one building. This is where the Callahan Center is, behind the city building in Bellevue. This house is no longer there. This was a coal house for the school that was there. They kept all their coal there. And this is something they would want to know on a Sanborn map because something full of coal and coal dust might be flammable. But we see its address is 182. And it's not a stretch to say that if this is 182 and you advance this far, 210 is reasonable. So we think that, based on also the fact that she paid so much for it, that was indeed a house on it when she bought it. If you can find tax records, great. They're tough to find. We just stumbled on them in the Bellevue City building. And so we were able to kind of show, I'll show you. This is the assessor's book for 1900. When I was first looking around, everybody told me we don't keep them after a certain amount of time. And it turns out Bellevue did not throw theirs away. They were stacked up in a corner and we found them. So this is it. I've used the whole page because this thing here, whoops, says personality. And what it says is it's a number of brick, number of rooms, and frame number of rooms. And then census and blah, blah, but I just like the fact they had a column that said personality for your property. So go ahead. And this is the 1900 tax record, and we're looking for name, lot and subdivision, and we're looking for improvement, because there wasn't a lot of farmland in Bellevue, and so if there's an improvement on a lot over a certain amount of money, we can assume that it's a house. And so we look down here, and there's Mr. Forster, lot 29 of block K, right dimension. There's no improvement on that land in 1900, in January. The assessor's book is from January of every year. And so this is the 1901 tax record, and we see that now it's Catherine Faulkner, same lot, but there's an improvement for $900. So by January of 1901, her house was built, and so we say, she can say that her house was built in 1900. You can use the census, the theory being that if somebody's living at your address, they're probably staying in a house because we didn't have a lot of campgrounds in Bellevue. Again, the federal census is free online. It's online, free at the public library. Ancestry has free ones, and I think they're making the 1950 one, which just got released, and that's history tracking people nerds. We're so happy when the 1950 came out because 1940 had been. The downside of using the census is it's every 10 years, and so you can find somebody living there in 1910 and nobody in 1900, but you don't know where in there the house is built. But at least you know by 1910 somebody's living there. This is the 1900 census. This is our house. We know that in 1900 our house was disappeared. Our house was at 50 Fairfield, and there's Frank Adams, the man who built our house. But you got to remember that your house might be rented, so sometimes you look for the address. If you think, I would look at the people who own the deed when I'm looking at the census, but if you don't see it, but you run across your address, then they're probably living there. Oh, and there's no 1890 census for Kentucky or Ohio. There was a fire at the archives that destroyed almost the entire census. Search your address. That's what we did when we first moved here, right? We ran our deeds back, and that was easy, but we tried to figure out who lived there. And we found out that this dentist, he's not living there, but he rented our front room. And we love to tell the story about the time after a rain, my wife found our dog's gnawing on a big old human molar. And we're thinking old Chet just pitched him out the window when he got done. No biohazard bags for that guy. So yeah, just Google your address and see what comes up. And know that if your address has changed, like especially in newspapers, your address may have been used for a different house at an earlier time. And search the names of people that live there. So this is Frank Adams again, and besides being the guy that built our house, he was a bit of a tough guy, right? His occupation in the city directory was like night watchman, and he was a policeman for a while. But here, this is about 1900, he breaks a beer mug over a guy's face and severs an artery so bad that the doctor had a tough time healing it up. And at this time, Frank's got to be in his 60s. So I'm hoping I can see a picture of him someday. We ran into his great-great-granddaughter. We live next to the Siam Orchid in Bellevue, and we were in our front yard, and she was coming to get food they had ordered. She lives in Fort Thomas now, and she says, I grew up in this house, and we're talking, and she says, somebody's got a bunch of photos, really old photos. But that was like during the lull in COVID, and what with COVID, one thing or another, and they're all older. We're waiting for things to die down, and then we're going to get together and see what their photos show. I'd like to see a picture of it. But anyway, just do that. 116 Berry in Bellevue is now 358 because of the numbering change. And be familiar with the history of street names and numbering in your sister city. Also know, we just searched, just to prove the point, I searched in newspapers.com, Bellevue, Kentucky, and you can see it missed all these Bellevues, probably because of changing the font size, but it has that Kentucky, and there's another Kentucky up here somewhere that it missed here. So it doesn't catch them all, and that's the point I'm trying to make is, if you get to a page and you think Bellevue might be on it, just go ahead and scour the page. Don't depend on character recognition to catch them all for you. So Preservation Act, this is self-explanatory and really dry. Basically, in 1966, they had the National Historic Preservation Act that allowed cities to form different entities to enforce preservation, and also gave tax breaks, tax credits if you do approved work. There are different levels of it. All the historic districts are listed in there. Bellevue has 3 now, with Bonnie Leslie being added recently. Newport's got a bunch, Covington. Okay, go ahead. So why? Keeps our property values high. Everybody loves Bellevue, especially once they get past a certain bid, because the downtown looks good and our houses, for the most part, have kept character. You can read these as well as I can. A lot of it is that your house was designed and lasted that way for maybe 100 years, so why rip those wood windows out if you don't have to? We found out with the window guy that it's not so hard to maintain them, and they work pretty well. And get your box gutters fixed, and get it roofed right. Don't replace your box gutters with something that's not going to handle the rainfall for a roof the size of your house. Things like that. Okay, so the greenest, we're almost done. The greenest building is the one that's already built, right? This is the Opera House. It was across the street from where your bank is, and it was fabulous. And then, again, nothing against him. He owned the property, and his business was expanding. But Mr. Gravitson, what is another photo of the Opera House too that I like?
So is that your building
Yeah, that's your bank.
Oh, I need a picture of that.
That's right. Okay, go ahead. That's another picture of the Opera House. This and has the streetcar, which I think looks pretty good.
So his garage is there?
Yes, and that's what we replaced it with. But it was done before we had the Historic Preservation Act, just a few years. And, you know, Mr. Gravitz, this is property, you can do what you want to do, this is America. But boy, if we would have had something in place or somebody to say, let's keep it, because you can't bring that Opera House, I get chills, you can't bring that Opera House back, cannot, right? The next one is a house, this is just up, and this is just to the left of the Harms house on Berry Street. This is just up the road from her bank. And this was a lovely house. This belonged to a man named William Skinner. He owned a big publishing house in Cincinnati. All the ledgers, our bank books, our tax books, all those were printed at William Skinner's. His shop is gone. I bet it was fabulous, but it's where that big freeway ditch is, kitty corner from the stadium in Cincinnati. But he was one of the ones that built a big house here, big plot of land. He actually bought two, and took either the streetcar or took the skiff ferry to work every morning. And you can see what a lovely house this is. And here's what somebody decided to do. And they closed in the porch and they got rid of just, and you'd like to stop that if you could. Go ahead. This is the Harms building. So Gus Harms, this was our fuel and water office for years and years. It still says Harms building on the top. This is the 1912 or 1915, the famous tornado that came that knocked the pointy steeple off of Sacred Heart. So they put the round one to replace it. This is what it did. And then by the 2000, it looked like that. Ooh. And then a lady named Mackey came along and she made Mackey Advisors and she brought it back. She tore the addition off and made it look much more like we would want it to look. This is why it matters. You can look at these and you can all just look, and even if you don't know what's wrong, you just look at them and say, this just doesn't look right. You know, you have shutters that are too small for the window. They're just strictly decoration, but at least make them look like they would work. Wrong door. Wrong door. They made the door shorter. They bricked in there. This, I don't know what's going on here, but it's wrong. Here they got rid of transoms. You can see how big everything was, and they're just not anymore. You'd like to stop that. Okay. Tax credits. This has changed and gone up. There's lots of information on how to do that. That's in the book. Bellevue on our page, we have this cool little guideline, which I actually downloaded sitting in our living room in Connecticut while we were waiting to close on the house, and I downloaded that because I was so excited to be getting this house and in a historic district and want to know what my responsibilities were. But it's more than that. It talks about tuck point and talks about windows, like when the window guy said 6 over 6. Well, I know what that means. It means 6 panes over 6 panes. But this book describes all that. It also describes some of the architecture, whether it's Italianate, Queen Anne, a Northern Kentucky townhouse like we have. It's a good book to get. You can download it off the city's website. This is Mr. Nick Clooney talking about preservation. Too bad his son didn't amount to anything, right? I just love his voice. So that's a great video, filmed in Bellevue, and pretty good. Go to the library. Go to the Kenton County Public Library. If you don't have a library card from there, you can get one if you have a Campbell County. We have one. They'll give you this guide. This guide has a lot of resources for looking up people and researching your house. It's pretty cool. This is from the Historical Society here in Campbell County. We belong to that. They're pretty cool. They're just a little disorganized, but we're going to try to help them get organized, at least the Bellevue part. Okay? Yeah, so great staff at the second floor in Covington. They have microfiche. They have a lot of resources there. And genealogical. We go to the state archives every now and then. Now, the state archives, they're official, but they don't claim anything. They only have what the cities give. So depending on your city may have given them more stuff. Bellevue didn't give them very much. We still find some neat stuff down there. But if the city did not hand it over to them to archive, then they don't ask for archive stuff. Okay? Resources, these are free genealogical sites. You can take a picture of this if you want, but they're pretty well known. We love the National Archives. It's a great way to spend an afternoon just clicking through. You can see letters that George Washington wrote because he was mad at a guy. It's one of my favorites because George Washington was known for not losing his temper ever. And in this letter, he says, "Lucky I didn't see you in person because I would have made you regret saying what you said." And George Washington was a big man, like 6'6", and the man he was talking to was like 80. So it was just seemed out of character, right? But National Archives are great. Library of Congress, that's where we go for our maps. So there you go. And Library of Congress Sanborn maps. So summary, we talked about researching your land and researching your house and its occupants. I'm trying to hurry so I can get to questions. I don't know how much time we got.
8 minutes.
Okay. Preservation is good. I couldn't think of anything more clever to say than that. And then resources. I've been asked for a process flow chart, so I'm going to leave this up so you guys can take pictures of it. It's pretty easy. Do you have your deed, or do you know what book and page your deed is on? No, you have to use PVA to find it. Yes, you go to the courthouse and look at it, or you look at it at your house. Does it provide the previous book and page? No, you got to use index books to get the previous book and page. You need lot number and or group number. You should have that written several times in all your documentation. Yes, you repeat the process. And you can take this back to, until the flood receded, I guess. Go ahead. So that's ours, it's in the book, but I'm going to leave it on this one so anybody that wants to take a picture can. It's also available, Jody's going to put it online somewhere. You repeat this until you're pretty sure you got all the names you want, because somebody owned your land for a long time before there was a house, and I didn't much care about who owned it. I was really looking for when my house was built. So are there any questions? Really, I hurried for nothing? Yes, ma'am.
So I live in Newport. And
Okay.
It's currently 426 West 10. But I knew that they had a different house number. And so with the
It probably had a different name.
Sanborn map and the 1894 map, it gives both addresses.
Yeah, they do that every now and then, but it's not, I mean, you can,
For Newport it does.
oh, for everyone?
In Newport.
Okay.
I look on the Sanborn map.
Okay, that's a great point.
I can see what the 1886 address is, which
Yep.
is 90 Tibbetts, and I can see what the new address, which was 420.
That's awesome. Bellevue doesn't do that. Bellevue on the, she said that the 1894 map gives before the change address also, which was a completely different, it was Tibbetts,
Right.
which was
90
one of
Tibbetts.
James Taylor's daughters.
Right.
Bellevue doesn't do that. Bellevue in the on the 1910 map will give you, every so often they will give you what the 1894 address was, but it's hit or miss. And on Marcy's block they didn't do that, or else we would have used that certainly. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I just want to say, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
It's interesting to dig and don't lose heart. I dug and found my house here in Newport on Monroe. A guy built it for his daughter for a wedding present, and the guy had he was a mortician here on York Street, and he built this house on Monroe for his daughter, and her new husband was the butcher in Newport. So it's kind of interesting to find
Oh,
out
yeah.
that history.
Oh, well, as you saw, we saw that Marcy had some guy declare his sister insane so he could sell the house. Christian Moorline sued another guy for beer money. Other things you'll find when we run deeds in Bonnie Leslie, and you guys know where Bonnie Leslie is? All the house in Bellevue, Bonnie Leslie is up the hill. We call it Faux Thomas. Get it? But all the houses look the same, which I don't mind. They're all like these little cottages, 1920s and 30s. But the man who sold it was named Harry Spinks, and he was a racist. He had 7, when you signed your deed, and all the deeds have it, up until the Fair Housing Act of 1964. He had 7 things, and the other ones still have the remaining 6. It was like, it had to be brick, had to be in the first third of the block, of the lot, had to face, had to have a driveway. Could not be commercial, that's why in Bonnie Leslie there's no corner stores or anything. You couldn't have a store there. This was the advent of the cars getting really popular, so there's no alleys in Bonnie Leslie. People ask me, how come Bonnie Leslie doesn't have alleys? That's when he laid it out, he didn't put them there. Everybody had a driveway, people wanted to show off their cars. But also the 7th one was you couldn't rent, sell, lease, or otherwise convey to anybody other than the white race. And of course it has, nowadays, again, it's unheard of to have that, but it's there on people's deeds further back. I say that because the irony is Spinks' family built a fabulous house on Overton at like 715. we drove by to look at it, and there's this huge Black Lives Matter sign right next to the porch. And I'm like, see, you don't control what happens after you're gone. So there's that. Yeah, so you'll find little stories, and that's why even though the ledger will tell you who bought it, you go back and get the dates because that's important. And also, you just as you do a little digging, you'll find out these stories like the wedding gift and the butcher. Yes, sir.
I know this is not the topic of the presentation, but I'm interested in historic photographs. We're purchasing a house now, we're in the process of closing a house in Newport. I see elements in the facade that seems anachronistic. And I would like to put back the original, for example, the window openings, they don't seem right.
Oh, the sidelights?
No, the second floor
Oh.
door window openings don't line up in
Right.
a reasonable way.
I understand.
That would seem contemporary to the facade. But I don't want to guess.
Right. But we found that finding old photographs, you know they got to be out there, right? It's tough. But I tell you, the Campbell County Public Library, and if you have a card, you can access it online. They have a big photo called Faces and Places. And you might stumble upon your house there. Bellevue, not so much, but Newport and Covington was certainly much more photographed than Bellevue. So, but it's difficult. But maybe as you find out who lived in your house, you may just through Ancestry or something reach out to somebody. Because what you'll see is as you're looking for somebody on Ancestry, you'll see that they're on somebody's tree. That means they're a descendant, and you can maybe reach out to them and say, hey, we bought the house where this guy lived. Do you happen to have any old photos? It's just a message on Ancestry they can answer, and it's, yep. That's what I would maybe recommend going that way too. But the King County Public Library, yes ma'am.
This is just,
Oh, don't worry about diversions. I am Mr. Diversion. I go off on tangents all the time.
So when we bought our house in 2015, the second story ceiling was dropped, and underneath that was just from air. My husband had to take away some of the plaster, and out of that ceiling, we found a letter from Hank Gastray, who was at that time playing for the Columbus Lowlands as a baseball player. And the last year that he pitched, he went to New York and Pittsburgh, but the last team he pitched for was the Cincinnati Reds. And coincidentally, this week in the Northern Kentucky, whatever that is called now, Lane or something.
Yeah, Lane.
There's, he's buried in the Wilder Cemetery, but he doesn't have a gravestone. So there's an organization that's going around and putting gravestones on former baseball players back during that time, because whatever. So, it was easy for us because, well, I saw his brother, we found tintype pictures behind fireplaces, so we feel pretty fortunate that we the only thing is he changed his name from Gastreich to Gastrite, primarily because it was easier for the fans to say Gastrite rather than Gastreich. So,
That's a good story.
That's just a little story.
Yeah, and we hear these stories a lot. Our neighbors in Connecticut moved a fireplace and found letters that had fallen, been on the, and I don't advocate tearing your house apart to see what you might find behind the wall, but you never know if you have to do something. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
As we were restoring our house, we found 3 glass negatives up on the 3rd floor, tucked under something. And so anyway, as I started to do research and continue it, I created, the family who owned our house for 75 years were the Schultzes. And I found out that they owned a printing company in downtown Cincinnati, and they would print like restaurant menus every day. And anyway, I've created a family tree of them on Ancestry, And then, I can't remember, but I was on Facebook and somehow I must have put information on our house on Facebook, but I found the great-great-granddaughter of Mr. Schultz. So then we connected, and then on Facebook, she had this huge amount of photographs, of historic photographs, including one of our house,
Cool.
and then of Mr. Schultz and his entire family.
Sounds so cool.
Yeah, I mean, you go down a rabbit hole and then you go here and here and here, and it's just, it's just really exciting.
Yeah,
When
that's a
when
great
you
story.
find out exactly who lived there and what kind of people they were, and I love his great-great-granddaughter, we were friends now,
That's cool.
yeah.
And sometimes it's easier finding people, okay, that way. More recent, I can't find yellow pages online, so like after 1970, it's tough. Although there are some city directories in the Kenton County Public Library. But I think that's my time, and I appreciate you guys coming. If you have any more questions, or if you run into a snag or something really interesting, we'd love to hear the stories. Our email address is in the book.
Thank you, Jim.